She was an Egyptian. She never was. Yet for more than 2,000 years, the world has believed exactly that. History remembers Cleopatra as the last queen of ancient Egypt, a woman surrounded by pyramids, wrapped in gold, descended from the pharaohs who ruled the Nile for thousands of years. It's one of the most famous stories ever told. And almost every part of it is wrong. Cleopatra was born in Egypt. She ruled Egypt. She died in Egypt. But she was not ethnically Egyptian. Her family came from Macedonia, a kingdom hundreds of miles away. They arrived in Egypt as conquerors and ruled the country for nearly 3 centuries without ever becoming Egyptian by blood. So how did a Greek queen become the most famous Egyptian in history? The answer begins with a man whose ambition reshaped the ancient world, Alexander the Great. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why almost everything Hollywood ever told you about her was built on a lie. In 332 BC, Alexander defeated the Persian Empire and entered Egypt. The Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator after years of Persian rule and crowned him pharaoh. Before continuing his campaign across Asia, he founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast and named it after himself, Alexandria. Within a generation, it became one of the richest and most influential cities on earth, its ports connecting continents, its great library becoming a symbol of knowledge unlike anything the world had seen. But Alexander never returned. He died suddenly in Babylon at just 32, leaving behind the largest empire the world had ever known, and no clear successor. Almost overnight, his generals turned against one another, each wanting a piece of what he'd built. Visual, Ptolemy claiming Egypt, being crowned in Alexandria. One of those generals, Ptolemy, made a different choice. Instead of chasing Alexander's entire empire, he secured Egypt alone, declared himself king, and founded the Ptolemaic dynasty. Although they ruled Egypt, the Ptolemies stayed proudly Greek. They spoke Greek, followed Greek customs, and kept their bloodline pure through marriages within their own family. For nearly 300 years, generation after generation, they ruled from Alexandria without ever truly becoming Egyptian. Then, in 69 BC, a daughter was born into that dynasty. Her name was Cleopatra VII. She would become its final ruler, and the last person standing between an independent Egypt and the unstoppable rise of Rome. Cleopatra was born into unimaginable wealth. But she was also born into one of the most dangerous royal families in history. Inside the Ptolemaic palace, loyalty meant nothing and power meant everything. Brothers betrayed sisters, sisters betrayed brothers, and parents turned against their own children. Assassination wasn't the exception. It was simply how politics worked. When her father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BC, the throne passed to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Tradition expected them to rule together, but peace lasted only months. Powerful advisors around the young king feared Cleopatra's growing influence, and before long, she was forced to flee Alexandria. She lost her throne, her palace, her army. To many, it looked like the story of Cleopatra had already ended. But here's what makes this story remarkable. History was about to hand her a second chance, and it would come from the most powerful man in Rome. At the very moment Cleopatra lost everything, Rome was tearing itself apart in civil war. Julius Caesar had defeated his rivals and arrived in Egypt while chasing one of his enemies. Cleopatra saw her opening immediately. If she could win Caesar's support, she could take back everything she'd lost. According to ancient historians, she had herself smuggled into the royal palace under cover of night, hidden inside a rolled carpet, though some accounts say it was a large linen sack. Whatever the truth, one fact is certain: she reached Julius Caesar without a single enemy knowing. That meeting changed the course of history. Caesar didn't just see a young queen, he saw an intelligent ruler, a skilled diplomat, a woman who understood politics as well as any king in Rome. With his military support, Cleopatra defeated her rivals and reclaimed the throne of Egypt. But But this victory came at a price. Her future was now tied to the most powerful man alive, and that connection was about to change Egypt and Rome forever. Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar soon became personal. Together they had a son, Caesarion. To Cleopatra, he represented a future where Egypt could stay independent under Rome's protection. That future vanished on the Ides of March. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated inside the Roman Senate, struck 23 times. For Cleopatra, the consequences were immediate. Her greatest ally was gone, and the balance of power collapsed overnight. She quietly returned to Egypt, knowing a new struggle for Rome had already begun. Three men now fought to control the Republic: Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus, the second triumvir. But alliances built purely on ambition rarely last. As tensions grew, Mark Antony took charge of Rome's eastern territory, a decision that would bring him face to face with Cleopatra herself. Their first meeting took place in the city of Tarsus, and Cleopatra understood that first impressions could shape history. She arrived aboard a magnificent royal ship, its purple sails filling the horizon, gold shimmering in the sunlight, the air thick with rare perfumes. Every detail had been carefully designed. This wasn't just a display of wealth. It was a demonstration of power. Antony was captivated. But Cleopatra offered him far more than beauty. She offered money, ships, food, and the backing of the richest kingdom in the eastern Mediterranean. In return, Antony offered military protection against Egypt's enemies. Their alliance quickly turned personal, and together they had 3 children. For several years, they ruled much of the eastern Mediterranean as partners. But back in Rome, another man was quietly shaping public opinion: Octavian. And he was preparing for the battle that would decide the future of the ancient world. Octavian knew he couldn't defeat Antony through military strength alone. He needed something far more powerful: a story. He launched one of the most effective propaganda campaigns in history, refusing to paint Antony as Rome's enemy and instead blaming Cleopatra. He described her as a dangerous foreign queen who had seduced Rome's greatest leaders, insisting Antony was no longer fighting for Rome, he was fighting for her. The message spread fast, and many Romans came to believe Egypt was trying to control Rome itself. War became inevitable. In 31 BC, both sides met near the western coast of Greece. The Battle of Actium would decide the future of the ancient world. Hundreds of warships filling the sea, thousands of soldiers waiting for the order to attack. For hours, the outcome hung in the balance. Then, without warning, Cleopatra's fleet turned away from the fighting. Moments later, Mark Antony did something historians still debate today. Instead of staying with his army, he followed her. The Roman fleet closed in, and without its commander, Antony's forces collapsed. Octavian had won one of the most decisive victories in ancient history, and the road to Egypt now lay completely open. Less than a year later, Octavian entered Alexandria. The city that had once stood as the greatest center of learning in the ancient world now faced its final days as the capital of an independent kingdom. As his army marched in, Mark Antony received false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Heartbroken, believing he'd lost everything, he fell on his own sword. He didn't die immediately. His loyal followers carried him to Cleopatra's mausoleum, where she was hiding, and there, in her arms, the great Roman general took his final breath. Now Cleopatra stood alone. Her army was gone. Her allies were dead. Her kingdom had fallen. Octavian wanted her alive, not out of mercy, but as a trophy, planning to parade the Queen of Egypt through the streets of Rome in chains. For Cleopatra, that humiliation was unbearable. According to ancient tradition, she chose death over captivity. Many believe she allowed an Egyptian cobra to bite her. Others argue she used a carefully prepared poison. The exact truth has been lost to time, but one fact is certain. In 30 BC, Cleopatra died at the age of 39. With her death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended, and after nearly 3,000 years of pharaohs, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Yet Cleopatra's greatest legacy was never the empire she lost, it was the story the world remembered. For centuries, paintings, books, and films portrayed her as the last Egyptian queen, an image so powerful that almost everyone accepted it as fact. But history tells a different story. Cleopatra was born in Egypt. She embraced Egyptian culture. She spoke the Egyptian language. She ruled as pharaoh. Yet her ancestors were Macedonian-Greeks who arrived with the successors of Alexander the Great. She wasn't the last Egyptian ruler, she was the last Greek ruler of Egypt. And that single fact changes the way we understand one of history's most famous women. The real Cleopatra was never simply a legendary beauty. She was a brilliant strategist, a gifted diplomat, a multilingual ruler, and one of the most remarkable political minds the ancient world ever produced. For over 2,000 years, the legend overshadowed the truth. But sometimes, the truth is far more extraordinary than the legend. If this changed the way you look at Cleopatra, subscribe, because next week, we uncover another figure history got completely wrong.